When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
"90 minutes on the field. That's practice one. 60 to 90 minutes before they ever get there. That's the number I want to start with today, because it surprised our players more than it surprised me. Before a single one of our guys steps on the grass for the first practice of the year, we're asking for somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half of their time, watching, learning, quizzing, just to walk in ready. It's almost a full practice worth of time spent before the practice even starts. And I'll tell you right now, that's not a typo, and it's not us being unreasonable. That's the whole episode, because last time I told you why we built this the way we did. The research, the 3 tiers, the flight simulator analogy. This time, I want to show you the syllabus, the actual thing, practice by practice, what gets installed, when, and how we made sure 44 kids playing more than 44 positions could all find what they needed in one place.
This episode is brought to you by San Pellegrino Ciao. A gift from Italy to your home. San Pellegrino Ciao is a flavored sparkling water made with real fruit juice, finished with a pinch of Sicilian salt for a perfectly balanced taste. So which flavor will you choose? Peach, lime, blood orange, cherry, or maybe the all-new limoncello? Crafted in Italy with 0 grams of added sugar. San Pellegrino Ciao. Buy it now.
Welcome back to One Play at a Time, presented by Just Play on the Coach and Coordinator Network. Last episode, I told you I'd take you from theory to practice, so that's exactly what we're doing today. Onto the actual install calendar we built for the season, the page our players open first, and the way we built our quizzes so a kid doesn't drown in content that isn't his. I left you the last time with a flight simulator analogy. The idea that a playbook is the manual, but the video and the quizzes are what actually put you in the cockpit before game night. I want to stay in that world for a minute because there's a piece of flight training I didn't get to. Nobody walks into ground school, which is what it's called for the training, and gets handed the entire manual on day one with a due date of Friday. There's a syllabus. Lesson 1 covers exactly what lesson 1 needs to cover and nothing else. Lesson 2 builds on it. And then somewhere in the middle, there's a check ride, a real evaluation in a real plane with a real examiner where you have to actually prove what you actually learned and transfer that to performance. And then the training continues because passing the ride check was never the finish line. That's exactly the shape of our install calendar. 9 practices before we're in a live season. A scrimmage after 5, a second scrimmage after 9, and every single practice in between has its own lesson plan, its own small, specific, non-negotiable list of what gets taught that day and nothing more. I didn't always build it that way 20 years ago, and honestly, even 6 months ago when I was piecing this together with 3 or 4 disconnected tools, install calendars in my head that looked more like a syllabus and less like I knew that part intellectually, but knowing it and actually building the infrastructure for a kid to experience it that way are 2 different things. And that's the gap this episode is about closing. Here's a piece of our program that shapes every decision I'm about to walk you through. We're not a program with 2 deep at every spot and a position coach dedicated to each one. We've got 22 varsity players, 22 JV players, 44 kids total on 2 levels, 1 staff, and a roster where a lot of guys are learning more than one job. Take our offensive line. We're working with something like 7 varsity-ready linemen and 7 more at the JV level. A few more will develop as the year goes on, but a real 2 deep at every one of those spots, done the traditional way, just isn't realistic for us. So we don't teach a guard one job and a tackle a completely different job that happen to live on the same line 5 yards apart. We teach it conceptually so that a tackle can play center or a guard can slide out to tackle, because our depth chart only survives if those parts can move. So that's part of our design. That's part of how we chose what went into our playbook so that we could give our players that kind of conceptual learning. And it's the same story on the skill side. A bigger receiver needs to be able to play some tight end. A running back needs to be able to line up at fullback. And our formation and personnel system is built specifically to blend those skill sets into hybrid roles that get the most of whatever a kid's actual ability is. And it gives us interchangeable parts up and down the roster. That's not us being cute with personnel. That's just honest math of a program our size. And every one of our assistants, myself included, has a full-time job outside of coaching. There's exactly 1 staff member actually in the building during the school day. So building it like a traditional day where we have time and we go right after school and there's no athletic periods. It's simply the time that we have every single day. I started describing this to our staff as a box of Legos. Give a kid a small number of basic shapes, and depending on how you combine them, he could build a race car or he can build a spaceship. That's really what concept-based teaching is for us. We're not teaching 5 separate jobs to 5 separate position labels. We're teaching a small number of core rules and techniques, the pieces, and then combining those same pieces differently depending on where a kid lines up that week. The player becomes interchangeable because the teaching was never built around the position label in the first place. It was built around what's underneath it in the skills and the fundamentals. And that's exactly the kind of teaching a platform actually has to be built to support. And this is where Just Play does something that a generic tool can't. It lets us tag one core teaching piece to every spot it applies to, so a tackle learning a rule doesn't get completely separate video buried somewhere else the week he's playing center. We teach the piece once, and the platform is what lets us combine it differently for every kid who needs it without doubling our own workload every time we move somebody around. So when we say we needed one place to organize and share this content, I don't mean that as a nice to have, I mean it as survival. If our install lives in 4 different tools, some in Huddle, some in a shared drive, some in a text thread, some in somebody's head, a kid playing 2 positions is now hunting through 4 places to find what he needs for both of his jobs. And a staff that's coaching part-time doesn't have the bandwidth to keep 4 systems updated and synced with each other. Something breaks, and it's usually the kid who's cross-trained because he's the one with double the material and half the time everyone else has to find it. I lived in that alternative for a long time when I wanted to get into flip learning. So I had everything in different places. I had docs or whatever it was at that time. Docs and Drive weren't popular. It was something else. There were forms. There were some folders, Huddle, a stack of separate tools that each did one piece of the job and none of them talked to each other. And that works if you're one person with unlimited time. It doesn't work when you're 44 kids deep in a roster where a lot of your guys wear 2 jerseys worth of assignments and your whole staff is coaching on top of a full-time job. Google can host a document. It can't tag a quiz to a position group, gate a rep behind a completed quiz, or tell me which of my linemen actually watched the protection video versus just clicked play and walked away. That's not a knock on Google. It was never built for football. It's a knock on trying to force a general purpose tool to do a football-specific teaching job. So the first design problem we had to solve wasn't a teaching problem, it was a filing problem. Where does everything live, and how does a kid playing 2 spots know exactly what applies to him without wading through what doesn't? Here's what we built. Every install cycle starts with what we call our general information page. 1 page, it's the front door. A player opens it and sees the entire install laid out practice by practice, term by term, with every single word a live link to the video or the diagram or the information behind it. But the thing I want to actually walk you through is what we use as the color code, because this is where a lot of our players and coaches said, oh, this was a missing piece for us. And I'll link a separate video where I walk you through these things so you could see what this actually looks like. So the blue is bold text with a link. That's a teaching video. It's a full concept, 3 to 7 minutes. The foundational piece I described in the last episode as tier 1. The bold red, that's a hybrid video, meaning it works double duty as both the teaching video and what we call a quick hitter, which was another tier of our learning. And usually for a smaller concept, that doesn't need the full treatment twice. So we're not building 2 pieces of content. The plain red on our list, that's not bold. That is the pure quick hitter. It's the reminder that's under 90 seconds. Again, that's another tier of the content that I mentioned in the last episode. And then we have a 4th category where we have the application videos. We show those in white text with a blue background, and those run under 2 minutes usually. They show a concept actually being run. Sometimes there's a voiceover. And anything that isn't red or blue on our page is just a link to a diagram or information there for them. And then separately, we list our quizzes. So they will get these installs position by position for day 1. What they need to know. For us, it's done really quickly, going through, clicking the things I want in that presentation, clicking the quizzes that are assigned to it, and they get that there as well on the install, but they see it here on this page. These are the quizzes I need to take. So a kid can look at anything on that install sheet and know before he even clicks it what he's about to get and how long it's going to take him. We didn't do that for aesthetics. We did it because we're asking a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, a 14-year-old to self-manage 60 to 90 minutes of learning around whatever else he's had in his week. And again, a lot of our summer was built around baseball practice, a job, a family trip, or whatever else was happening in the week. We've got a quarterback who's on his way back from a trip to Canada today. And he said, Coach, I'm going to watch this. I got 6 hours in the car. I'm going to dig into it then. That's fine. So any player, if he has to click every link to find out what kind of content is behind it, he's not going to do it efficiently. And eventually he's not going to do it at all. We want them to know that, hey, you're into this for 3 to 5 minutes, or you're into this for 90 seconds. I think it's important. And I think it gets more of that compliance that we need, more of that buy-in we need for them to get this done. We tell them flat out at the top of the page, use this to get ahead on your learning if you want to. So we will assign those installs that I mentioned in presentations, which is a great tool within Just Play. We'll assign those the night before, but if we have players who want to get ahead of it, it's all here on the install. They can click those links. They know the quizzes that have been assigned to them because they're listed there. So otherwise, that install, again, is going to get released the night before practice. That's fine too. So for us, do it as you prefer. That's not us being soft on accountability in any way. It's built on the same idea from the last episode that these are self-directed learners who've been trained since middle school to consume things on demand. We're not fighting that instinct. We're giving it a place to live. I think there's a lot of reasons why this couldn't be a Google Doc. I want to be direct about something because a coach listening to this is going to ask it anyway. Why does this need to be Just Play specifically? Why not just more discipline with a shared drive? Here's the honest answer. Every piece I just described, the color coding, the position tagging, the quiz gating, isn't a formatting trick I layered on top of a general tool. It's how the platform is actually built. When I build a play, the diagram, the teaching video, the quick hitter, and the quiz all live attached to that same play. If I update a rule, it updates everywhere that the concept shows up, not in 4 separate documents I now have to remember to go fix by hand. When I assign a quiz, I'm not manually building a distribution list. I tag it to a position group once, and it automatically routes to my linemen or my skill guys or just my hybrids, whoever it's actually built for. And I can see player by player who watched the video all the way through versus who clicked it and closed the tab, and whether a quiz result reflects real understanding or a lucky guess. You can get documents into one share folder. What you can't get from Google Drive or any general purpose tool is a system that was actually designed around how football gets taught. Plays, personnel, install calendars, and player-by-player accountability built as native pieces of the same platform instead of 5 tools stitched together with hope. I spent a decade stitching. That's exactly the frustration I described in our first episode. Just Play is the first tool I've used in this game where I wasn't the one doing the stitching anymore. It's the system I found that was actually built for this job, not repurposed for it. So let's walk through what's on that page for our very first practice, because the scope of it tells you something. And I'll say up front, I'm not going to hand you our actual terminology here. We're bringing a new offense to Bay this year, and I'd rather our opponents learn it on Friday nights than off this podcast. So think of the categories, not the code words. Practice 1 is 90 minutes, and it is, by design, our heaviest install day of the entire preseason. It's a handful of procedure calls, the operational words that tell a player to run a play, reset, or run it again, or that the play is dead. A few personnel groupings, we'll call them personnel 1, 2, and 3. Several formation calls with directional read built right in, plus the number adjustment rule that goes with them. A motion, a run concept, 2 full pass concepts with its entire family of tags, 2 protections, a quick game concept, a play action concept, a screen concept, and even a trick play. Situational football for first, second, and third down are emphasized as well. And that's a lot for day 1. And I'll be honest, it's on purpose. Practice 1 isn't really about the plays, it's about the vocabulary. Every single term a player is going to hear for the rest of the season gets introduced that day in its smallest, cleanest form, so that everything after is addition, not translation. We're not re-explaining what personnel 1 means in week 4. We already spent day 1 making sure that word means something specific and permanent in a kid's head. And then here's what happens across the next 4 practices. Practice 2 is 50 minutes. It adds 1 new personnel grouping and a couple of new formations and tags. Nothing close to the volume of day 1. Practice 3 is back to 90 minutes, and that's where we add our first full slide protections, some more advanced pass concepts, because by day 3, they've got enough foundation to handle it. And practice 4 is shorter again. It's mostly protection variations, a situational red zone, and goal line work. Practice 5 then is the day before our scrimmage, and it's almost entirely about tags and wrinkles on the pass concepts they already know, plus a screen and a trick play. You can see the shape of it if you step back. It's heavy, then lighter, then heavy, then lighter, and then more of a wrinkle day. And it's not random. That's respecting exactly what I talked about the last time. You can only load so much new information into working memory before retention starts to drop. So we don't do that. We stack the biggest concepts early, and then when the well is empty, we get lighter as the well starts to fill up. Now, here's the one piece that actually protects all of that, the quizzes, and specifically how we built them. Every quiz on that page is tagged to a group, not just the team. There's a set every player takes, procedures, and the handful of concepts that touch everybody, like our play action pass concepts and our screen game. Then there's a skill player set for our receivers and backs, the hybrids in that room, covering personnel groupings, formations, motions, and our core pass concept. There's a separate offensive line set, different quizzes entirely built around their protection rules and the run scheme from their perspective. Running backs get their own version of some of those concepts because a tailback's job is different on a given run concept than an offensive lineman or a tight end, and they're not the same quiz. Our tight ends then, our hybrid players, along with them, get a set built specifically around the jobs they're actually going to be asked to do. And I made all of this possible and easier for myself by creating a knowledge base within ChatGPT and then cranking out the quizzes, cranking out descriptions for our playbook. There's a lot of fields you could fill in and just play. And I felt that they're there for a reason and we wanted to take advantage of them. So if you were to dig into our Just Play playbook, every single place that content can be, we have it there. It's designed by purpose and it's utilized to help the teaching and the learning. So I want you to think about that for a minute, because I think most of us, I did it in the past when we built a quiz. It was for the whole team. It was done just because at the time it wasn't very efficient for me. As I said, using AI now, I can tailor these specifically, and then using Just Play as the platform allows me to distribute them to who they're supposed to go to. I think the general quizzes, they don't work for the recall. That's the whole purpose for us, is not just compliance, it's about recall. So a kid who exclusively is an offensive lineman, he doesn't need to have mastery of our formation system. It's not important to him. It doesn't touch him. But the kid who's cross-trained to maybe be a tight end, who does need to know some of those things that an offensive lineman does, and needs to know receiver jobs, he's going to get both quizzes because he's asked to perform parts of both of those jobs on Friday night. So again, we'll tailor that quiz specifically to him. So things like the quiz we developed at our tight end on Run Concept 1. Building it any other way wastes his time, or it leaves a hole in his preparation. With a roster our size, we just can't afford either one of those things. And we don't treat these as optional. Right at the top of the quiz section for practice 1, it says this explicitly: complete these beforehand or you will not get reps in team. And it's not a threat. It's just the truth of how our practice time works. We don't have enough snaps in a 50 or a 90-minute practice to let a kid guess his way through a rep he hasn't proven he understands yet on paper first. In the last episode, I told you about retrieval practice, that it is the single most effective tool we have for moving something into long-term memory. And this is where that stops being research citation and becomes the gate for us. If you haven't retrieved it through the quiz, you don't get the rep. Most of you listening to this already know the term that I'm about to use, flip learning. And it isn't new. It's not a fringe idea. It's something that I've written about, started writing about it 15 years ago, and I just walk you through how we do it. The video, the quizzes before practice, the meeting, and the field time spent doing instead of listening is a flip model. I'm not telling you we invented something. I'm telling you that we finally built an infrastructure to do it properly. And I would say what I did in the early days was very much limited by the tools that I had. The part that doesn't get said enough, though, is that research on flip learning is not a slam dunk. So did some research on this. The largest meta-analysis on it, which was 114 studies out of the University of Utrecht, published in 2019, found that the average benefit is real but small. And translated into plain terms, the average student in a flipped classroom performed like they'd landed around the 64th percentile compared to a traditional classroom. And it's good, but it's not the revolution that the buzzword promised. In a separate study that was tightly controlled out of Johnson and Wales was even more sobering than that. When they actually pre and post tested learning, flipping the classroom moved the needle for under 15% of the students. Over 80% showed no significant change, and a few actually did worse, even though the overwhelming majority of those same students said on a survey that they liked the flip format better. That gap between we liked it and we actually learned is the whole ballgame. And both studies point to the same reason for it. It's not the concept, it's the execution. In the Utrecht research, the classrooms that quietly cut into real face-to-face application time saw students learn less, not more. The ones that protected and built out real in-person practice time saw the actual gains. The lead researcher's own conclusion was that flip learning could work better, but only when it's designed appropriately. And designing it properly is such a heavy lift that he doesn't recommend a teacher try to do it alone. And that's the piece I think we really need to sit with here, because it's the difference between a flip that helps your players and a flip that just moves the same problem online. Flip learning fails most of the time, not because the idea is wrong, but because most people who attempt it record a lecture, record their presentation, post it, and hope the in-person half sorts itself out. That's still a manual. It just now has a play button on it. So everything I walked you through in this episode, for us, it was the color coding so the kids know what he's about to watch before he clicks it. The quiz gating, whether he earns a rep, the meeting rebuilt down to 15 or 20 minutes of actual application instead of me talking. the 30 minutes on the field before practice ever starts, that's not flipped learning bolted onto an old system. That's what the research says a flip actually has to look like to move the needle. And I'll be honest, I could not have built that myself on the side the way most of us attempt to do it. It took a platform that was built to carry the structure, not just host the videos. And I think this is where I missed before. I thought we did a decent job at it. I know it helped our players in a lot of ways, but it certainly did not maximize their learning like we are right now. So back to the syllabus and the flight simulator analogy of the check ride. Notice what happens across our 9 practices. The first 5 are almost entirely about installing new football, new personnel, new formations, new concept, stacked practice over practice. And then we play our first scrimmage. After that, something shifts. Practices 6 through 9 barely add any new plays at all for us. What they add is operational football. More procedure calls, like how we check at the line or how we handle our 2-minute and clock management situations, how we kill the clock, how we open a series, how we handle our last plays of the half or the game. Those are procedures, not plays. They're about how the team functions in real time under a clock in exactly the kind of pressure that shows up in a game and never shows up in a walkthrough. We didn't sequence it that way by accident, and we didn't do it because we ran out of new plays to teach. We did it because you can't install situational football on top of a foundation that isn't there yet. A 2-minute drill only means something to a kid who already trusts his assignments well enough to execute them fast, under pressure, without re-deriving them in his head. So the first scrimmage isn't the final exam on this install. It's the check ride that tells us the foundation is solid enough to build the situational layer on top of it. And that scrimmage functions exactly like that. It's the typical 10-play scrimmage, maybe a drive at the end of it. Then we play our second scrimmage after practice 9, and the season starts. That scrimmage then has some of these situations. Now we're testing those. So the real install never actually stops. It changes shape once the games start counting. It goes to a weekly rhythm of install and how we're going back through and doing that. Something we'll show you later in this series. Before I get to what I'd ask you to take from this one, sit with a number that I haven't given to you yet, because I think it's the one that actually explains why we built all of this in the first place. A college program gets 25 practices before their first game. That's 25. Full staffs, one-way players, a position coach dedicated to nearly every spot on the roster, probably multiple position coaches. We get 9 before game week even starts, and that's not a number we chose. It's a number our roster hands us because our guys are playing both sides of the ball, and there's only so much practice time you can split between 2 units before game week. Has to start eating into it. And the 4 practices we get once the game week begins, that's 13 practices total, standing between our first snap of camp and our first snap that counts. That's 13 against 25. So if anybody hears video platform and pictures something built for programs with a full complement of assistants, one-way players, and time to burn, they got the whole thing backwards. We have less than half the practice time a college staff gets, a fraction of the coaching bodies, and players learning multiple jobs instead of one. A program our size isn't the exception this doesn't apply to. It's exactly the program that needs it most, because we can't afford to spend a single one of those 13 practices reteaching something a kid could have already learned on his own. Here's what I'd ask you to take away from this episode. Whatever platform you're using, or whether you're using one at all, build one front door for your install, not 4. Use color codes or ways to flag it or tag it in the contents so a kid knows what he's clicking before he clicks it. Tag your quizzes to the jobs your players actually do, not just to the team as a whole, especially if you're running a roster like ours where kids are wearing more than one hat. And sequence your install like a syllabus, not a manual. Load the vocabulary early, get lighter as you go. Save the situational football for after you've proven in a live scrimmage that the foundation can hold it. And if you're already flipping your meetings or thinking about it, don't stop at recording a lecture or a presentation and posting it. That's the version the research says barely moves the needle. Protect the in-person time, spend it on real application, and build the structure to actually gate and track it. And that's the difference between a flip that works and one that's just a manual with a play button. Think back to that first episode, and I said I could put a $20 bill on that first binder I designed as a head coach. I'm still not going to tell you the exact number, but I can tell you this, that it is very encouraging to see our players in our playbook learning. The difference this year isn't that our players are smarter or work harder than the ones I coached 20 years ago. It's that we finally built a system for them, a syllabus, instead of handing them a manual and pointing at the interstate. In the next episode, we're going to get into the part of this that starts to get messier. How did we handle the kids who missed all of this over the summer, whether that was another sport or a family vacation, kids we didn't see till tomorrow, which is day one of camp, and how our quarterbacks actually use the platform differently than our offensive linemen do. Everything from today, a look at how our general information page is structured, will be in a separate video. We'll link that in the show notes. I want to thank Just Play for presenting this series. Everything I walked you through today, the one page, the color coding, the role-based quizzes, the gate on reps that we're using isn't something you can bolt together out of Google Docs and good intentions. It's possible because Just Play built a system specifically for how football actually gets taught. That's the difference, and that's why they're the perfect partner for a series about teaching the modern player. So we'll see you next time on One Play at a Time, presented by Just Play on the Coach and Coordinator Network. Be sure to follow all we're doing at coachandcoordinator.com and follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.